because it's really all about feeling better every day. Just feeling better today than you did yesterday. That's really all it's about. You're the golden red got the strength to carry on, Hello, beautiful soul family. Britt Cannon here, host of the Walk On Podcast, the podcast where I try to demystify spirituality, personal growth and healing, and whatever else I feel like talking about. This week's episode is called Owning What You Want. Last week, I talked about how to stop self-sabotage. The week before that, I talked about unrequited love. And the week before that, I talked about fake friends. All of these, the solution to all of these issues, I realized in talking about them week to week, is owning what you want, knowing what you want, clarifying it for yourself, and then peeling away all the parts of your conditioning that keep you out of alignment with what you want. And I was really this whole week thinking about how so conditioned we are. We're just like really indoctrinated into the capitalist belief that what we want is always out of reach. You know, I in my podcast in general, I talk a lot about how oppression is playing out constantly in macrocosmic and microcosmic ways. So, you know, capitalism is a macrocosm, white supremacy is a macrocosm, the cis heteropatriarchy is a macrocosm, and those things trickle down into our family units, into our interpersonal lives, and into romantic relationships, and then are perpetuated when we have kids. And that's what creates generational trauma. So everything really does have a systemic root. I know you probably get sick of me saying that everything is capitalism's fault, but it kind of is. But knowing what we want doesn't necessarily mean like a new car or, you know, a new eyeshadow palette or whatever. It's more like internal, less having to do with the material world and more about like, what do I want out of life? What do I want life to feel like for me? What do I want my relationships to look like? How do I want to feel day to day? What do I desire deep down? And how am I standing in my own way to getting that? And that's kind of going back to self-sabotage. Like why we self-sabotage is because we have an unconscious awareness of what it is that we want, but there's something beneath the surface that drives our behavior to kind of run away from that or repel that or reject that when we do get it. It's feelings of unworthiness, it's fears of rejection, it's fear of getting something good and then losing it and how bad that would hurt because we know what that feels like because of our childhood. And owning what you want really requires a lot of self-awareness. It requires a lot of introspection and reflection. It requires just like a really strong sense of self. And so that's what I talk a lot about. In my own experience, in my own healing journey, you know, I was like queen people pleaser. I was like, I talk in my podcast about this, how like I never do anything half-assed. Like I do everything 100,000%. And so I was 100,000% a people pleaser. I had basically no identity. I didn't even consider or think about what it was I wanted. If my relationships were meeting my needs. Sorry about my retrograde mouth. It's almost over, y'all. Please just bear with me. I didn't even consider like even down to like interests. Like I had no idea really what kind of music I liked, what kind of movies, what my style was, what my taste was. Like I just had no idea because I had such a strong maternal figure who really molded me in her image of what she wanted me to be. And it got so thick in my subconscious and in my behavior and in my just like experience of the world. My entire being was tied up in her approval, so much so that like it took me a long time to untangle my sexuality, my gender identity, my politics, just like everything needed to be reassessed and reconfigured. And just like analyze to figure out how I actually felt about things. And I talk about way back in this podcast, probably in a couple different episodes in previous episodes, I talk about how my body image was sort of my first clue that I had been projected on. And I was realizing through reading this book, Toxic Parents, Toxic Families, Susan R. Forward, something, I don't remember the title. It's a really long title, but it's a great book. I have the link to it in a previous episode called The Books That Helped Me Heal. In that book, I was realizing that every woman who experienced trauma ended up with severe body image issues and eating disorder difficulties. And so that made me realize, like, oh, my issues with my body aren't mine. Like, they were given to me. I was told how to feel about my body. And if someone told me how to feel about my own body that I live in, maybe that means that I can change how I feel about it. And so I set about doing that. And that was sort of the first domino in a series of falling dominoes that eventually led to my own liberation from my family of origin and me creating and discovering who I actually was, my own actual sense of self, which led to the discovery of my own wants, needs, and desires, and really completely changed my life. Like, totally. I am so different than I used to be. My life looks so different than it used to look. And that's all basically in response to that one moment of realizing, like, maybe what I've been taught isn't right and maybe I can change it. Before then, I felt really hopeless, like just at the whims of my repressed trauma, basically. I just couldn't figure out why life was so hard for me. I couldn't figure out why things seemed so easy for other people. I just was very lost. And suddenly things started clicking into place and I found myself. So I talk a lot about how, because of that previous version of myself before my healing began, where I was such an avid people pleaser, I had been conditioned by my toxic family to be this like emotional support eldest daughter for these very toxic people who are very stuck in their own trauma and who will probably never heal. And when I started healing, every step of the way, every landmark of healing, every realization I had, every boundary I tried to lay, every aspect of myself I tried to share that I had discovered something new was met with extreme resistance. You know, tantrums from adults, from elderly women, just pushback, doubt, attempts at gaslighting. I just really was met with resistance that was like so extreme that I didn't expect it. It surprised me. It felt like it came out of nowhere. And you know, when you operate from the place, when you've been told your whole life, like, I love you unconditionally. No one's ever going to love you like I love you. Like, I love you for exactly who you are. No matter what you do in life, I will always love you. And then you try to be yourself, and that is the one condition that the love is based off of. It just really throws you for a loop, and you experience what in tarot we call a tower moment, what I really like to think of as a reality collapse, where like the veneer that was placed over top of the real situation crumbles, and you're left with a very harsh truth that can be difficult to accept. Often we accept these truths in little chunks and little bites, but in a reality collapse, you have no choice but to see it in its full glory/horror, and it kind of throws you for a loop for a little bit. So that's what happened. And I realized, if I am going to, like, how do I word this? Once you realize, you can't unrealize, right? And so when I was realizing these things about myself, it's not like I could stuff it back down and go back to the way things were and keep pretending that things were fine. Like, I didn't have that choice anymore. I had come too far. And so I was like, well, all I can do is continue on. All I can do is keep trying to communicate, keep trying to mend bridges, you know, keep trying to be myself and hold space for these people. And each time resistance, each time conflict, each time pushback, each time gaslighting. But what I was doing was I was just like, I know this is right. Like, I know I'm healing. I know I have the right of it, at least for myself. Maybe this wouldn't be right for any of them, any of my family of origin, any of the friends I've left behind, any of the partners I had to break up with. Like, maybe this isn't right for them, but I know this is right for me. And that is what kept me sticking to my guns and continuing on the path and kind of becoming unshakable in my sense of self and in standing up for and defending the things that I want, you know, owning what I want, and the things that I need and the things that I cannot tolerate. Like, that's really what grounded me and rooted me in my truth. And that is what ended up being the catalyst for a lot of things ending and for my life changing in very profound, sometimes very hurtful, but ultimately really beautiful ways. And I think that is the main point that I kind of want to communicate, is that there is a sacrifice to owning what you want. There is a responsibility that comes with the realization and with the self-awareness and with the self-actualization that, you know, owning what you want doesn't only mean pursuing the career path that feels right to you, or getting the relationship you want, or, you know, like I said, material possessions. It's more about, how can I do what I need to do in each moment to make sure that I'm living in integrity with what I want, you know, because that's really the test. And I think that's where people get caught up in those cycles of self-sabotage, because, like, I want a healthy relationship, right? Everyone wants a healthy relationship. Everyone who's like healing oriented wants a healthy relationship. I don't think that anybody is like, I would love a toxic relationship. I would love for someone to just abuse the hell out of me. No, we want like real love. We want reciprocal love. We want communication. We want collaboration. We want community. But where the self-sabotage comes into play is when it comes time to like put up, when it comes time to practice what you preach. That's when it gets difficult, because the second we get triggered, the second we get challenged, you know, it's really important to have like a partner or friends who kind of are aware of the way that you struggle and aware of your default settings, as I like to think of them, you know, your pre-healing, trauma-brained state. So my loved ones call me on it when I default to people pleasing instead of advocating for myself, you know, and I do the same for them. We communicate, like, it's so beautiful to give someone that you trust the nugget of truth, the precious pearl of your wounds, and have them treat it with respect and kindness. It's like mind-blowingly beautiful. 'Cause that was not the case in my previous pre-healing existence. And so that's really amazing now that I think about it. But this is where it gets a little challenging. Not as challenging as my previous life, where I was completely out of alignment with what I wanted and couldn't advocate for myself at all. That was way harder, but it just requires me to step up in ways that I find challenging at times. It's good challenging, you know, it's like forging a stronger version of myself. It's like helping me navigate adulthood and like maturity, and it really is what I want, you know. It's just not sunshine and rainbows. It's like sometimes hard, and I think that that's really important. It's like sobriety, you know. I wanted sobriety, right? I really wanted to not be avoidant. I really wanted to be able to like sit in my emotional state, whatever it was. I wanted to not run from things. But then when life got hard, what did I want? I wanted to drink. I wanted to get stoned. I wanted to party. I wanted to escape. I wanted to ruminate about some unavailable person that I was in love with. Like, I really wanted to relapse. And like, relapsing is actually harder long term than sitting with those uncomfortable feelings and allowing them to wash over me, and then going about my day, week, month, whatever, in a state of awareness of how I'm feeling. You know, that is harder in the short term. It's much easier to just like dip and ignore and avoid. But so it's harder work in the moment to commit to the sobriety, to be like, I'm dysregulated right now. I desperately want to self-medicate. And instead, I'm going to go another direction and like do my healing tools that allow me to remain in my integrity as a person who's in recovery. And, but it ends up paying off in the long term, because the more times you do that, the better you get at it, and the better you can navigate life without running away. Like, you actually, life is hard. Life hurts. It sucks out here. The white supremacist, capitalist, heteropatriarchy is fucked up. Climate change is scary. Like, it's just, the world is bad. And, and it feels really difficult to commit to healing sometimes. It feels really difficult to commit to presence, to continually grow, as it feels like life is getting more and more difficult. You know, it's challenging. It's exhausting. It's sometimes feels a little bit futile, but it's not, because it's really all about feeling better every day. Just feeling better today than you did yesterday. That's really all it's about. And if that's the only goal you can set for yourself, I think that's a pretty good one. And it actually ends up paying off like 10, 20, 100-fold if you can really lean into it and commit to it. So owning what you want is not easy. And I think that's why so many people don't do it. I think that's why so many people just, you know, like the Two of Swords, just close their eyes and like close their hearts and pretend like they don't want anything, you know, pretend that they don't have any desires, they don't have any dreams, they don't have any ambitions, they don't yearn, you know. And again, take it out of a capitalist context, like not just work, but relationships, community, fulfillment, you know, spiritual peace, growth, self-awareness, self-actualization, like just being a kind, generous, boundary-having person moving through the world, you know, being a positive force of love. Like, that's what I'm talking about. And I think that's why it's easier for people to kind of move away from that and make their worlds really small and make themselves totally identify with caring for someone else, or, you know, as in a codependent relationship, or I don't know, just giving up their identity and personhood and individuality in order to play a role in society. I mean, I think that's what capitalism sort of requires of us and expects of us, is just to be a worker, like with no other desires, with no other goals, with no other dreams. That's what the pandemic right now in its current state is kind of, that's what's, besides all the death and the sickness and the societal collapse, like that's what is really getting to people, I think, is this thing of like the government expecting you to only go to work, to literally risk your life to go to work, and then to not see your family on holidays, to not be able to hang out with your friends, to not be able to play shows or attend events or do anything that is like pleasurable in life, and instead only exist as like a worker drone. It reminds me of the Lego movie, which I know I talk about all the time, but it's just a really good, it's like They Live for Kids. It's a really good movie about the perils of capitalism and conformity. And so, you know, that isn't enough. Like that is just using a tiny, tiny fraction of our everlasting soul. And it's really unfortunate and sad. And I think at the end of your life, at the end of our lives as human beings, I think the way to greet death as an old person with no regrets, with like gratitude, with peace, with acceptance and surrender, is to live your life on your terms as much as possible. That doesn't mean fucking people over. That doesn't mean being an asshole. It doesn't mean being super selfish or self-obsessed. What it means is understanding that you're on your own journey as an individual, and that anyone who comes in your life is either swimming or flowing downstream parallel to you, or parallel for a moment and then drifting away, and that it's up to you to cultivate your own happiness. It's up to you to nurture your own fulfillment. It's up to you to own what you want, to create the life you want. It's within your power. It's within your ability. It is available to you. It just takes some commitment. It takes some self-awareness. It takes some serious boundary laying. It takes that unshakable inner knowledge and understanding of who you are inherently and what you need and want out of life and how to go about getting it. After you have these realizations of what I want is a healthy relationship, well, then you are sort of requiring or tasking yourself with becoming the kind of person who can be in a healthy relationship, right? If you want a job that is fulfilling to you, you have to be doing something that feels good. So you have to like ready yourself to be in that position. You have to sort of rise to the occasion. And that doesn't mean that you aren't enough right now. It just means that we are just a block of marble being turned into a statue, smoothed a little bit every day, a constant work in progress. Life will always be shifting and changing around us. We will always be being molded by our circumstance and molded by ourselves and molded by the people that we interact with. And that's beautiful. That's the way it should be. You know, being complacent isn't really the way to happiness. In fact, accepting that the only constant is change kind of is. And hopefully you are changing and growing in the direction of becoming more yourself every day. And I really think that that's all that owning what you want is about, is just becoming more yourself every day. Forgiving the past you that didn't know what you know now, feeling grateful for the you that knows better in this moment and that will know better than you do now in a future moment. And just, enjoying the ride. So this week, I challenge you to explore yourself, explore your patterns, explore the ways that maybe you have expressed what you wanted in your life and been kind of shot down or discouraged or gaslit about it, and to kind of take a moment or a couple moments to define right now in your life what it is that you want, and think about how you can get there. Think about maybe what you need to heal, what fears you might have to face, what changes you might have to make. And don't get too stressed out by the big picture, but just think every day, what one little thing can I do to get me closer to where I want to be? And that's really all it takes. You do that a bunch of times and eventually you get there. And that's beautiful. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you want the full episode, you can click the link down below. All my other links are down there. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Happy healing. Bye.